And how was your interview process? How did you find the interview process during the IIM selections actually? Your graduation from MBA from IIM Indore. How was the placements then? Did you manage to get into a good company?
Indore, I genuinely did not think I would convert because it was one of those stress interviews. It was one of them, playing. Back then, I was like, why am I doing this? And it was also a time when women in sales was practically unheard of.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
I remember this one sales meet. In fact, all my sales meets in the 3 years that I was in Madhura Courts.
Right.
There were like 40 sales managers and above teams, and I was the only woman.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. Always the only woman.
Right.
And
Hi guys, welcome to the new episode of Edge, a podcast series by iQuanta. Today with us we have Shireen Sultana, who graduated from IIM Indore and is currently a co-founder at KinderPass. So let us dive into her journey and her experiences into the corporate world that she has just entered, and let us know everything that all you aspirants need to know. So, how are you, Shireen ma'am? How's life going on? How's everything?
I'm good, Sushmita. Thank you. Thank you to you. Thanks to you and to iQuanta for having me on this show.
Yes. Okay.
It's exciting. Life's great.
Right.
And I'm happy to be here.
Right. So, since I mentioned that you graduated from IIM Indore, which is like a top B school in India, right? I don't know back in 2003 how was it, right? But it is regarded as one of the top MBA colleges, right? So how do you feel to be, a part of IIM alum? How does it make you feel now? And do you feel that it has somewhat impacted your life and what you're doing right now?
Oh, definitely. On the impact part of it, I think the more I say, the less justice I would do to it, because being from an IIM, while of course the advantages of the label, etc., exist, I think the biggest strength is the alumni network.
Correct.
And how we stand up for one another. And what some folks have taken it a step ahead, and we have a network of women from IIM worldwide. So there are about 7,500 women and counting today.
Right.
And there are subgroups of every interest that you can think of by geography as well. And the founders stand up for one another, support each other. So it's great being part of an alum from a prestigious institute. It also meant that early on, in our formative years, the exposure we got to the kind of faculty that would visit us, the kind of case studies, because Indore after Ahmedabad was one of the first to introduce a case study methodology. So a lot of learning went into those formative years as well.
Right.
So definitely a plus, I would say.
Okay. So can you share a little about how you got into IIM Indore? How did you make this decision कि IIM Indore ही जाना है? What was it the preparation phase, the interview process, and finally getting into IIM Indore? How was it?
Actually, a little bit of history before that was CAT happened almost entirely by accident for me.
Okay.
A friend of mine, and I was doing my commerce, wanted to go see a CAT training institute, a CAT prep institute in Vizag, Visakhapatnam, where I'm from.
Correct.
And I just gave her a ride till that center. I was like, since I'm anyway here, जाके पता करते हैं क्या है, because CAT क्या होता है पता नहीं था. I was a small town girl, मुझे डॉक्टर बनना था, as with every Indian girl back in the 90s.
Right.
So that's where I was. But then I said, let me try this out, and it looked interesting. The format looked interesting. It looked like fun. Because I came from science, biological sciences to commerce. So for me, it seemed very drab.
Right.
So CAT seemed like an exciting thing, right? So that's how my foray into trying CAT happened.
Right.
I attempted CAT twice. So the first time I couldn't clear any of the IIMs.
Right.
I got an admission. I even paid up for TAPME, Manipal.
Correct.
But then I really wanted to try again. So I gave it the next time around. And quite surprisingly, I was surprised that I got all 6 calls.
Amazing.
Back then. However, for me, it was a big fear factor, because having come from, my last exposure to math was 10th standard, right? 10th grade.
Right.
Uske baad I'd never done math. So for me, that was a big fear that was looming over my head. So my preparation wasn't, I would be lying if I said it was very intense. I worked very hard. I worked consistently.
Correct.
So I would ensure through the year I spent that 1 hour, 1.5 hours every day, right from start to end. That was my level of consistency. I did my mocks very religiously. I did a lot of practice tests and all of that. But that I think helped in some way. We were thrown up very like a curveball, if you would, because the format of the paper changed drastically that year.
Right.
So that 1 year, very weirdly, that 1 year they shifted the format from the MCQs to a very different 3-section model.
Correct.
Very historic for you right now, I guess.
Right.
It was a googly that nobody had expected, and we were like, "Bhaiya, ab to clear hone se raha." So I was very sure I won't clear it.
Correct.
Because math was super tough that year. Everybody, I think, was expecting single-digit scores.
Correct.
But that, by God's grace, happened. And while I got all the calls, I gave about 10 interviews, 6 IIMs and MDI, the usual top list.
Yeah.
I couldn't clear any of the other IIMs because I've also never been a topper. Like, I've never been a 90% plus. I've always been the 80, 85%.
An average
student. Back then it was not average, but today 80, 85 is average. Yeah. But so it was not, I was not a topper. So I was kind of expecting that A or C to nahi hoga. Between B, L and I happened, and the MICA also happened. So I was very excited about advertising, marketing and advertising. So it was a toss-up between the two.
Correct.
And your first question comes in here where, I was like, yaar, label hai. People talk about IIM grad ka benefit hoga.
Right.
But Indore was also new. Like you said, we were the 5th batch or something.
Amazing.
So, but I kind of went with the IIM label, and also with the fact that the exposure will be much wider, and guest faculty will be very different, vast.
Right.
And it's not a niche as niche as advertising was my thinking.
Correct.
That's how Indore happened.
All right. And how was your interview process? How did you find the interview process during the IIM selections actually?
Oh, the interviews actually, as was legend back then, right? Every institute had a fairly different approach to their interviews. Some were the stress kinds, some were easy peasy, conversational. Indore, I genuinely did not think I would convert because it was one of those stress interviews. It was one of them, playing the good cop, bad cop routine of the interviewers.
Right.
But so it was, there was a bit of, the group discussion was also part of it, and that went okay. In the interview process, there were references to that. There were references to the academics because that was also a question.
Correct.
As to, why this, and after these grades, what do you think, what are your chances, and will we not be compromising on the batch quality if we bring in someone with these kind of ACADs? Of course, I gave hopefully the right answers, and that's why I was in.
Amazing. Okay, so now that you have converted IIM Indore, what was on your mind when you were entering IIM Indore? What was on your mind? How was the feeling?
I think I was completely unprepared, It just happened.
Correct.
It just happened, right? And I come from a small town. Visakhapatnam is a very small, still a very small, sleepy town, and this was 2001.
Right.
Not exposed much, protected family and all of that. So when I went there, it was a bit of a culture shock.
Right.
It was also a lot coming at me because I was like, differential calculus, hey Bhagwan, ye kya hota hai?
Correct.
Preparatory course had all of that. But it was also at the same time, the challenge was exciting. The extra hours, the work, the thinking was exciting.
Correct.
So it took me a while. It took me the whole of first term to, I think, just wrap my head around what was happening.
Right.
But then, I've made friends and, friends for life there. So it's been a good time.
Right. Okay. So, coming to the fact that you converted IIM Indore, one very common, question, a confusion aspirant goes through is, how do I finance it? Right.
Yeah.
So back then, I don't know, there might be like huge changes on the fees and stuff. But again, थोड़ी बहुत difficulty तो I guess सारे ही aspirant face करते हैं. So how did you finance this tier 1 college?
Yeah, so like I was telling you earlier, back then it was heavily subsidized, but it was still expensive for someone, coming from a regular college and stuff. So luckily, educational loans were definitely picking up at that point. So my father pitched in with a collateral, and the campus was also very helpful because this was Bank of Allahabad.
Correct.
So they were also on campus.
Correct.
It was a smooth process thanks to that.
Right.
And of course, a large chunk of the fees came from them, and the rest of it we pitched in. My dad pitched in, and family pitched in. But that's how I managed. It was a student loan that came to my rescue.
Okay. So now that you have, described how you entered IIM Indore and how, you were overwhelmed with everything because everything was like kind of, unexpected for you, right? But with all this, there's a common myth that follows for MBA that, it's pressuring, like they grill you so much, right? And, there's late night interviews and stuff like that. So how did you find that, the pressure, the academic pressure, pressure of, performing well in the extracurriculars as well? How did you find that there?
The academic pressure is real, and rightly so, I would think. In hindsight, I feel like it was the right way to do it. Back then, when you're going through it, you're wondering what's the point of it all.
Correct.
But you are really trying to crunch life learnings or business learnings into 2 years, right? Of course, there's a lot you would want to do it.
Correct.
Now, contrary to people who come with work experience, right? I was a fresher, and my experience wasn't in this domain. I was to teach for that 1 year break year that I had.
Right.
But other than that, there is no real exposure to business situations, to not just decision making. I mean, just operational problems that running even a small to mid-sized business could have.
Right.
So you're crunching all that learning into courses, into broken down courses as primers and so on and so forth, second year specializations, etc. So there is bound to be so much more, I would say, struggle. There's a lot packed in.
Right.
But I think that's the fun part, right? It kind of prepares you for real life.
Right.
Right. If today, if I could redo all of this, I would probably work a couple of years and go back, because relatability would have been much higher.
Correct.
Having said that, theoretically also, there's a lot that for example, I would say it's a very ballpark number, but you're really talking about 5 or 6 years or 10 years of experience being sort of distilled into learning, right? In the form of learning. So somewhere that it's like high pressure is bound to happen, right? When you're condensing something so much. So that's what happened. That also sort of set me up for the next 1 year of management training that I had to do out of campus. And the work expectations henceforth. It was also fun because it's in those scenarios that you really, you discover your strengths, right? You discover how far you can go. You also discover smarter ways to work. You discover the power of collaboration, teamwork, and so on. So, उस टाइम पे नहीं समझ में आया था कि अच्छा ये सब हम सीख रहे हैं, but in hindsight it's good to realize that that's what we were going through.
Right, मतलब MBA does prepare you for real life challenges.
It definitely does. Work environment challenges for sure. Case studies, I think, are probably that come close to lived experience of what a workplace is like and what situations are like. So those really helped.
All right. Okay. So having said that, the academic experiences, and performing better on extracurriculars. So, somehow you managed to cover these 2 years. After, your graduation from MBA from IIM Indore, how was the placements then? Did you manage to get into a good company regarding the placements or summer internships? How was the experience back then?
So summer internship, interestingly, I did with TVS Electronics.
Amazing.
It was a market research project. And like I said, right, I was so green under the years that I was, अच्छा ठीक है internship है, marketing में चाहिए, जो मिल रहा है ले लो. It was not a thought through thing. And again, we were, I think, far more naive as 20, 21-year-olds back then as versus 21-year-olds today. There's a lot of information at your disposal. There's a community, or there is a bunch of there's a social setup that has gone through this before you that you can tap off, right? It could be groups, it could be communities like yours, where there is so much more information, knowledge that is shared and prepared, right? We didn't have that advantage back then. So what really happened was I took that first year's internship there. For placement, I managed to crack Madura Coats. So Madura Coats is known to have the most, one of the most hard and, challenging management trainee programs ever. But, again, one of those experiences which I think if you give me a chance to redo it again, I'd probably do it all over again the same way and not change. Because it was the biggest challenge. Right, I was posted in Hyderabad, then in Dharwad and Hubli, where I would actually take the local bus to North Karnataka and everywhere, standing in for a sales representative, for a territory sales in charge. So you are carrying bags of threads and walking from tailor shop to tailor shop, trying to sell that thread. That's really what a sales representative does. So you're standing, it's like the police training, right? You do every level just to understand the challenges of that level.
My God.
And it was very enriching. And they would put us in different disciplines as well. So three months in each discipline. Eventually ending in as an area sales manager for a specific branch and so on. So that was
Amazing.
exciting.
Correct.
Back then I was like, why am I doing this? And it was also a time when women in sales was practically unheard of.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
I remember this one sales meet. In fact, all my sales meet in the 3 years that I was in Madhura Courts.
Right.
There were like 40 sales managers and above teams, and I was the only woman.
Wow.
Right, yeah. Always the only woman.
Right.
And it's changed. I mean, I used to go to shop floors in Delhi, right? We were working with manufacturers and export houses.
Correct.
Shop floors in Delhi where there are 500 odd people working away, and they've never seen a woman on the shop floor. So they would be catcalling, hooting, and whatnot. It was very weird for me, but I guess that was the point of it all.
Right.
To really strengthen you, to see what it is like and how will you face these challenges, how will you strengthen yourself through it. It was hard for me. I come from the south. My first stint, in the management training was in Hyderabad and Bangalore and Karnataka.
Right.
And then suddenly in Delhi and in Faridabad is a very different experience.
Correct. Yes.
But that is really what makes you stronger, what makes you understand how to face these challenges. How do you overcome them? What can you bring from within you to face these kind of issues? So that really helped, I think. So that's how Madhura Courts I stayed on for 3 years.
Okay, great. So covering your whole journey, the day you decided to appear for CAT, interestingly, and then you appearing for CAT and converting IIM Indore and, getting placed in such a great company. So one, although it's been years, but still one message that you would share it with current aspirants, related to the MBA world that they would be dealing with, although it has changed a lot, but it might be quite similar in more or less ways, right? And with the specialization that they should be going for, and there are students who bluntly just go for MBA that they're offering me package, so I should just go for it. So what should be on their mind if they're actually planning for MBA? If one message that you could give to the aspirants.
See, actually, I want to say a couple of things, right? One is, even before you make that choice, be clear why you're making it. Yes, at that age, with the hype around, the 15 crore package mil gaya isko and all of that, it sounds exciting, but be sure why you're doing it. Even if you're not sure of what you want to do, why are you even choosing this path versus the other options available to you should be fairly clear, right?
Correct.
And what really where do you want to go? It's not, I would say today's time and age, it's not unusual to not have clarity on really what I want to become. I think we put too much pressure on starting grade 7, 9 on kids to say, you should know what you want to become.
Right.
It's not the case. Thankfully, I think India is also changing. Asia is changing and going towards what the Western world is like, about self-discovery being a longer process, right? And being forgiving about changes. But having said that, when you're investing time and energy into an MBA, I think the fact that what am I going to take away from here should be quite clear.
Right.
What my career will be, which job will I get is a secondary matter. What do I want to take away from this should be very clear. Like at the end of it, I want to have learned what it is like to be an employee, what it is like to be an entrepreneur, or what is it even like to be working for anybody, for yourself or for someone. What does it entail, right? And a bunch of other things. Secondly, what we hire, we've recruited over the last few years from different campuses for internships, right? And including IIMs and other prestigious institutions. One pattern I see over years is, students come in being very, very, very rigid. I'm saying calling it rigid, some could call it focused about this is what I want to do and this is where I want to go.
Right.
Okay. Now, at the early formative years of your careers, early stages of your career, do as much as you can. Try to pack in as many experiences as you can and as varied experiences as you can. Because that really helps you understand, today, if you have a model saying that, I want to work for a tech company, I want to be able to become a growth hacker for a tech company, right? Great. But what does it entail? Growth hacking comes from understanding different levers of growth. And how will you understand those levers of growth? By actually working on or in each of those spaces. So be open to multiple exposures, open to different opportunities. Don't get straitjacketed so early in your life. And get your hands dirty, guys. That's the only way to grow in whatever you do, right? Fold your sleeves, roll them up, just get your hands dirty and don't shy away from hard work.
Right. Great. Amazing. Okay. So let us, since you are a co-founder and many of our aspirants would be pretty much excited to know, that there are hardly people who, complete their MBA and then, start their own, become an entrepreneur and start something of their own. So, can you just share a little about what KinderPass is all about and how's it been going with the years?
Sure. So KinderPass we started in 2019. Interestingly, my co-founder and I go back to campus. We were roommates and friends from 2001 onwards. So we've known each other half our lives now.
Right.
And that we both went our separate ways in terms of careers, me in sales and marketing, her in marketing.
Okay.
But at some point when we became parents, we felt that there was a need for something like KinderPass where parents really know exactly what to do. Today, when we started KinderPass, and far worse even today, parents are unclear about the harm they might be causing their child because they don't know.
Correct.
Sometimes you make mistakes because you don't know better, right?
Right.
And that's changing in a lot of areas, but in parenting it isn't. Even today we assume what our parents tell us, that ye aise hi hota tha, aise hi karna chahiye, is the best way to do it.
Correct.
We apply a lot of science in other aspects, right? People are doing biohacking and various elements to really understand themselves and their bodies. But that science needs to get extended to parenting as well. And that's really the space we wanted KinderPass to occupy.
Right.
And that's how we launched it. Wow. Today, we got the app, and we have about 1.3 million families that downloaded the app and used it. But our focus today is really on parents within this set who have children who have some form of developmental delays or disabilities, right?
Correct.
Starting from something as simple or short term as stuttering or stammering, going on to much more complicated congenital issues that they might have. So that's what we do. The genesis was, again, like I said, as parents, what we saw, and then as we grew through KinderPass, we realized who the problem is the biggest for, and therefore we further decided to focus on that segment.
Amazing. Okay. So now, because you're an entrepreneur, you're dealing with so many things, that there are so many tasks to be done. There are so many departments to be looked after, and there is hiring that you need to do at the same time. So how do you manage your time, with all these problem solving? How do you manage your time? And, how much do you delegate your work and your power so that, it gets maintained equally and, you don't have the pressure after all? How do you manage it all?
I think you've used the right word, which is delegation, right? Because we as entrepreneurs tend to believe only I can do this best.
Correct.
But we also forget that we only have 24 hours. And if I'm doing a task that somebody else can do as well as me, if not better, then I'm making a mistake, a huge mistake. Because my value add to the business is not execution, but really saying 6 months hence, what does the business look like? What will it need? Am I prepared for it right now? What does the market need? What does my user need? So those are the strategic elements that as a founder you should be more involved in and lesser in execution. And the way to free up that time is by delegation. Having said that, as entrepreneurs, you don't really have deep pockets to hire the best in class resources, right? So we've done multiple formats over time. We raised about $500,000 last year.
Wow.
Right. So, but before that, it was just 6 of us. 6 of us really, working very, very hard to make this happen. Once we relied heavily on interns from different B schools, different sources, even on UG kids, which I have to tell you, I'm impressed by the quality. So we did all of that, and then delegate to whatever level you can, sort of train some of these people, automate a lot of processes that are then fail safe it, foolproof it. And then, of course, once we did have, when we had the money, we had the resources, we started to hire the right set of people, and then created a second layer of people who are responsive, have the responsibility and the authority to execute. So really, I think that's the key. Knowing when to let go of the ropes and hand it over to somebody else and focus on the bigger picture as an entrepreneur. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not saying I'm nailed it, but trying to do that now.
Okay. So many aspirants, would have in mind to, start something of their own after MBA. But many of them are confused. We might not have the resources, but we do have an idea to go for it. So what do you think should be like, a pathway for them to actually enter entrepreneurship and, grow with it? What would you suggest to these aspirants?
So I think this is a great way to apply whatever you've learned in your B school duration to business, right? So while it is in theory that you might have read about a business plan and putting things together, I think that's a great tool for you to even understand the viability of your idea, right?
Correct.
Couple of things that I keep telling aspiring entrepreneurs, fresh out of B school or late, with people with experience, is to not, one of the biggest fallacies is to say, I have an idea, I can start up right away.
Correct.
Right, but that's not enough.
Right.
Whether there is a need for that idea. So, is there a pain point that you're solving? Is there a problem that your prospective user, buyer is experiencing? Is there a pain point that is currently not being solved efficiently? Either cost effectively, in a good way, at the right time. All of those factors should be your first filter, right?
Correct.
Second is to say, is somebody going to pay me for this solution?
Right.
Yes, I have a pain point. For example, today we would have loved to have maybe very good lighting in this room, right?
Correct.
That's a pain point that you and I might experience when we do events or shoots.
Right.
But if somebody is going to charge you a bomb to get that lighting, that pain point is not being solved because the price at which you want it is not the right price point they're offering.
Right.
Therefore, is someone going to pay me for it, and how much are they going to pay me for it? Is the next level of questions you want to ask yourself.
Correct.
And whatever you have learned in the 2 years, 1 year of your MBA is really, this is the time to apply all of that.
Right.
Is to speak to prospective customers, do all of your research. So one of the things I see consistently in startups, especially tech first startups, is user orientation is on the lower side. Understanding market dynamics, consumer research, competitor research is not in place many a times. In startups that I mentor, I see that happening a lot. They have a great product, but is there a product market fit? Do I need to wait to build they might have a great idea as well. Do I need to wait to build out my full product, or can I use an MVP based approach to launching my idea or my startup? Is the orientation, people, like you who've done an MBA or who are aspiring to do an MBA should be able to crack. Right? What's the difference otherwise between someone who's just fresh out of college and is starting up versus your MBA, right? Where do you, all the gyan that you have got in the 2 years, you need to start applying that. And the biggest, I think the third thing is to say that, am I the best person to solve this problem? Right? Because if you're not, for instance, one of the questions we kept getting asked is because my co-founder neither I have a health background. So one of the first questions people would ask us is, but why you, right? You guys don't have any health experience. So who brings the health know-how? We overcame that challenge by creating a panel of advisors. We put together a bunch of like a 65 plus people, clinician panel and so on. So the point really is, what strengths do I bring into building this business, into solving this pain point, and why am I well placed or uniquely placed into solving this pain point? So these are a few of the many questions you should really ask yourself. Put it down, flesh it out with people around you. That's where your peer network comes into play. Flesh it out with your faculty, etc., before you even think of taking a step ahead. And that's, I think, one thing I consistently recommend to everybody who comes with an idea.
Great. So now, because even if you are a team of like 30 to 40 people, there is a work culture that's maintained, right? So what work values and company cultures do you feel are the most important at the workplace?
So my co-founder did this excellent exercise, when we were growing. We did a value definition exercise. So we went through some templates and some set processes to arrive at an individual level. What are our values? What is our purpose? What are our beliefs, etc. And that really helped us understand, because what we noticed is there was a common pattern evolving in our hiring, which was to say that this strengths finder sort of format throws up your top 5 strengths and your values, right? And what was interesting to see was integrity and honesty were among the top 3 for all of them. So we knew that that's something that is very core to us, right? It was about impact, right? And it was about kindness. In our business, which is sort of allied healthcare, and we work with children. So kindness is a very important value we would want people to have. Integrity, honesty were anywhere there. Service orientation was very high. So these were things that were coming out. But what we were happy with was also that functionally, the skills that we would hire for. So someone in attention to detail is something we would want our tech team to have, right? And it was coming through. And that's the way we also felt going forward as we scale, is to be able to define what the core values for even not just as an organization we'd have, but functionally what would we expect. Learning agility is critical as a skill. So values, skills, beliefs, I think should be defined well enough, and to be able to hire by at least being able, or if not hire in the early days, the first 60 days or 90 days, to be able to inculcate some of these into the team. Is what I is working for us right now.
Great. Okay. So, when we look into your life, it's like, you were from a small town, from a decent college, and then you got this exposure during your post-graduation. And then luckily you got a great job where you got to learn so many other things. And now finally you are an entrepreneur, things are going good. You are a co-founder now. So how do you think has all this worked out for you? Like, were there times when, you felt this isn't going to work? It might be after you got, placed from MBA, midway, abhi where you are and jahan pehle the. Midway, there might be some instances, where you felt nahi ho raha, this should just shut it. Because every individual faces this once in their life, right? So if any kind of experience you have in your mind that you can share with us.
So I worked for almost 12 years in the corporate before taking this plunge, right?
Correct.
So when I think when I became a parent, when I became a mother, things changed quite a bit for me. I actually took a backseat. I didn't I paused my corporate career.
Correct.
And I also started to realize that somewhere, if I wanted to bring my child up on my terms, I will need that kind of flexibility.
Correct.
And I'm glad today a lot of organizations are talking about helping mothers. Back then, I would still think it was an either or. Like, you could either be a mom or you could be an employee. You can't probably be both, especially in functions like ours. And rightly so. So if you're working in a marketing team or a sales team, you can't expect to not go out and meet your users or your channel partners and so on, right? So, but I like how technology has sort of enabled that today. But back then, it was a big question mark looming on my head that if I want to go back to a full-time corporate job, would that be possible?
Right.
That was there. But once I've become an entrepreneur, I think, like you said, those days come very often. Like, why the heck am I doing this? Am I even doing the right thing? That's a question that I think looms over every entrepreneur's head very often, right? It's like a sword dangling over you. Every time you face a roadblock, that sword comes, nicks at your head and goes back.
Correct.
So even today, I think I keep asking myself that question, right? So that is bound to be there. But again, like I said, taking it one day at a time is what I'm doing there.
Correct.
That if I have like a shorter term goal to take the business from A to B to C, is my being there and doing this the best way to do it?
Correct.
Right? For today, for example, we are evaluating whether the best way to keep KinderPass going is the D2C model, or should we even pivot to other models or partner with someone else, or what are the various other options?
Right.
So those are the kind of recalibrations you need to do to say that take yourself out of the equation.
Correct.
So if the business has to deliver its best and serve its purpose, what's the best way to do it?
Right.
Now, whether it is with you, with someone else, with everybody else being around or not being around, are answers that will come naturally to you.
Correct.
So that's how I've managed it so far.
That's great. Yeah. And we hope that you manage it so well in future as well. Definitely. Yeah. Okay. So we would like to conclude the show. Our aspirants must have gained a lot of edge and, lots of clarification with the corporate world and, when they are on their entrepreneurship journey and with their preparations. So one very final thing that I would like to know your opinion on would be, but since, it's kind of rare to see women entering entrepreneurship and, stuff. And because you were part of, during your MBA as well, you were doing jobs that did not include women, right? So that has changed a lot. Today, women are standing out a lot on it, right? So what's your viewpoint on it? Like, do you feel future maybe women would be,
when I look around, I think it's encouraging. But when you actually see labor force participation data, it's not as encouraging, right?
Correct.
So I think that the drop-off rates are still the same.
Right.
That after you get married, there is a level of drop-off. After you have one kid, there's certain drop-off rate.
Correct.
After 2 kids, it's a different story. So all of those markers still haven't changed.
Correct.
And I think for that to change, there has to be far more, I think, concerted effort by not just, either just employers or employees, but the ecosystem itself has to come into play.
Correct.
There are some things that need to get regularized.
Right.
Education needs to come into play, right? Not just that. So today, if there are working parents and the school system is not supportive of working parents,
Correct.
it is going to be a burden.
Right.
So there's some, I wish I had the answer to it, but the way I see it is with the advent and the extent to which technology can be personalized
Right.
to everyday lives,
Correct.
everyday situations. I feel like that might be a game changer for working professionals per se, for children and the way they learn, for adults and how they learn, and for families and how they grow and exist.
Okay.
I really hope someday I would be part of that,
Correct.
executing that change, but I think that's something that needs to happen.
Right.
Before we can see a much more significant participation rate from women in the workforce.
Correct. Great. Okay. I hope lot of, women who are planning on to, start something of their own or, enter corporate world as fresh do gain some insights through this as well.
I hope so too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shireen, for sharing all your insights with us. It was so great to have you on our show.
It's been a pleasure to speak to you,
Yes,
Sushmita. Thank
definitely.
you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Bye.